Okay, hello. Okay, I'm gonna have to get used to this. I'm used to having a mic attached to me, so I'll try to stay right here. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. My name is Donald Barrett. I'm a senior designer at Insomniac Games, and I'm here to talk about my work on Marvel Spider-Man 2, the Flame quest arc specifically, and kind of how we also do our missions, pitching, that whole process. So I'll be talking through that. A little bit about me as well. I actually got my start in this industry doing QA. I was a QA tester for Disney Interactive for a while, working on Disney Infinity 3.0. That was a great experience and got to learn a lot about the production process. I wasn't necessarily developing content, but I was testing it, writing up bugs, regressing bugs, working with the development team. So that eventually led me to Insomniac through a connection, and started at Insomniac in quality assurance as well. But there was a junior designer position that opened up relatively early on when I started there, and I was on the kind of back end of development for Marvel Spider-Man 1 at the time. So this is 2017, and just worked my way up from there, working on the Hammerhead enemy bases for the City That Never Sleeps DLC. I moved on to work on the Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales game for the PS5, and did a lot of different content for that. I did the boss fights for Prowler and the Hollow Vulture, challenges, enemy bases. They had me on a lot of open world content. And then in Marvel Spider-Man 2, I primarily worked on the Flame Quest arc, and then started taking on work for the main story missions. I did the second mission of the game, the aftermath of the Sandman fight, and the Black Cat chase. So, but most of my talk will be around this, so just some highlights. But yeah, I've broken my talk up into a few sections. First, I'll go over just the process of research and study for preparing for a pitch, pitching the content, and putting together a whole pitch deck, dealing with feedback, processing it, addressing it. This will be kind of a beat that I hit throughout my talk. Building out various quest blockouts. This piece of content actually was broken up into 4 missions, and each one had its own series of challenges I'll talk through. Collaboration, how to collaborate well with the asset teams, artists, gameplay programmers, lighters, animators, VFX artists, localization, narrative, and then just bringing it all together. So, yeah, the thing I like to say about with research and study, there was a lot that I didn't know, and I could have just gone out and put something in the level editor out of my head, but any reasonable designer, developer will need to take some beats to read, watch videos, do their due diligence. And so the way it actually started was I was given a prompt to create a whole quest arc around these 3 characters. In Marvel Spider-Man 2, as many of you probably have played and seen, we have both Peter Parker and Miles Morales as playable characters, but this quest arc was centered solely around Peter. And his relationship with Yuri Watanabe, who is the Wraith in this, and a new villain that we set up and tease for future content is Cletus Cassidy. And so I had to dig into different resources for even these characters and their relationships to each other. And so comics, for sure, books. Did a lot of that. Listened to podcasts. Actually, the thing I didn't mention earlier is one of the big hooks for this content was we were dealing with a cult. And that Cletus Cassidy would be leading this cult, and they would be abducting people in the city, and Spider-Man would have to stop them. So I did research even into cults and how they were formed, their history, how they rose and fell. That's kind of why. That's how I named this talk. Is cults tend to rise and fall. Films. One of the films I watched was oh my gosh. Now I'm forgetting it. It's with Mel Gibson, and couple people, but the good cop, bad cop relationship. Thank you, yes, Lethal Weapon, yeah. So I was second guessing myself on that name. But just the relationship between Peter and Yuri, and how Peter's that good cop, Yuri's that bad cop that is willing to do whatever for justice. News articles and other video games, certainly. I think, the Batman Arkham series gets thrown out a lot as a comparison. Certainly we looked into those games as well for great reference. There's a villain in Arkham Knight that I really liked. He was the cult leader in that black. Oh, man, I don't know why I'm blanking on these names, but yeah, he was kind of the inspiration of like how we would do our finale for this arc. So, but all of the research that I did, and most notably, wanted to kind of base a lot of this off of was the Jonestown massacre, and that's a pretty heavy topic, and I don't want to go into it too much, but it was actually kind of the basis of kind of the what if version. What if Spider-Man stopped Jonestown from happening? And the finale of this mission, we kind of did our own version where the stage was set for a Jonestown-like massacre, but you never see it happen. Spider-Man gets there in time and stops it. So spoilers if you haven't played this content yet, but that was it. That was kind of the basis of my pitch, was really just a statement or a question. What if Spider-Man prevented Jonestown from happening, and what would that look like? A lot of our content, and probably across many other studios, if it's a game or even just a piece of content or a mission, usually starts with a statement. A couple of pitches that I remember for some of our previous games. If you guys know Sunset Overdrive, one of the pitch for that was, what if the world was ending, but it was awesome? And just things like that, things that'll kind of get people's minds going, and it's like, yeah, what would that look like? And then if you guys know The Unspoken, one of our VR titles, I think the statement was the Wizards of New York. Simple as that, but that's pretty much what that game was, PvP spellcasting in New York. But anyway, so once we kind of had what we needed for information and processing, we started putting together that pitch. But it was a lot. I don't think we had pitched a whole quest arc all in one go before, and I was willing to take a swing at it, but I had to take on 4 quests, introduce a whole new enemy faction. This was expensive. Introduce an ally, so we had Wraith with you for a couple of the missions. But in one of those missions, we turned into a boss fight. That was also very expensive. And introduce really the true villain of the arc, Cletus. And that was a big one because it was this balancing act of how much focus do we give Wraith, how much focus do we give Cletus, how much focus do we give to the relationship between all these characters. And I think really all the way till ship, felt like we were figuring that out. But this is like a little screen grab I grabbed at the very end of my one big pitch deck. It was almost 50 slides, it was 47 technically. I only had 30 minutes in the meeting. I had Brian Intihar, our creative director, Ryan Smith, our game director, Jacinta Chu, our one of our art directors. And I was talking like a madman for 20 minutes, just like blah, 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 blah. I covered it all, got through it, and pretty much looked like this. I got to the end of it, and Brian Intihar just says, "Are you okay? Did you breathe?" So yeah, really, and just that statement there, they even said it's like, after mission 2 out of 4, we kind of lost you. So that was humbling, and what actually it did, which was great, get great feedback. It allowed the directors and the team to reassess the time, because I think originally the plan was do this whole arc in just a couple of milestones, get it stood up, and And we found out very quickly that was not realistic. So what was wonderful and very generous of them, well, of course, we had to narrow the approach. It was still 4 missions. They were still pretty big, but we just found places that we could trim down. This was really helpful. We just agreed, like, let's spread it out. Let's get 1 mission per pitch, per milestone. Instead of just doing all 4 missions in 2 milestones, each mission got its own milestone, which was great. We get about 8 to 10 weeks per milestone, so that just gave us, a lot more to work with. Narrative at first, we were kind of working in tandem a little bit with the research, but then I kind of went off and made the pitch, ran it by narrative really quick, and they're like, yeah, that looks fine. And then we all experienced it, and we're like, okay, let's just focus on 1 mission at a time, and I'll work with narrative. And also not to deviate too much, because it was easy to say, like, hey, let's get this, let's figure out this mission, but what is the connective tissue between these two? So no, let's just focus on the mission. We'll figure out the connective tissue later. Thankfully, as development went on, they gave us even more time, and this ended up actually taking up most of development time for me throughout this project. It was about 3 years. But yeah, I'll move on really quick. The building out the various quest blockouts was an interesting task because I was kind of doing it while I was doing the pitch. That proved to be a little bit disruptive. I actually had to put that on the side, just focus on getting the pitch deck down. And then once we felt good about the flow and the story and what we were going to be putting together with the team, that's when I could go in and do the blockout. So this is just an early shot of the first mission, actually when we introduced the cultists for the first time in combat. And another set of issues, since this was actually optional content for the most part, a lot of other parts of Spider-Man 2 were taking priority, and I didn't get a lot of resources, so I was actually just working on blockouts, kind of in a box, still using real world reference as much as I could, but our metrics for Spider-Man are a little. What's the word? Huge, I guess is the word. Everything had to be, combat metrics, right? This floor right here, it had to be at least 12 by 12 meters for basic combat. And ceiling heights for combat are about 6 to 8 meters. So everything kind of just started feeling like big warehouses. But the first mission takes place in a hospital. And if we've all, any of us who are familiar with hospitals, ceiling heights are really low. And so we had to actually break down a lot of walls and break down ceilings and really make it actually this kind of destroyed, abandoned place. And so that, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but that was one of the big issues was I was trying to make real world spaces and deviating a little bit from our metrics. And that, of course, caused problems with gameplay and flow and combat and traversal. The biggest issue was we were trying to do too many 90-degree turns and the rise over run to something about keeping everything in frame when you're looking at the next room or when you're headed to the next area. You can't have too much neck craning. And that, of course, contributed to issues with comprehension. And really, part of trying to make this scale feel more in tune with the world versus just, huge warehouse metrics. I was trying to accommodate the art team as much as possible, making their job easier. But again, it kind of worked against their workflows, and so we had to kind of reevaluate a lot of the spaces. This is another shot of actually the exterior of the hospital that I was blocking out. One of the first iterations, I was doing this in-game version where Spider-Man has to save a bunch of the cultists that he just beat up from a collapsing building and get out of there with Wraith. We ended up doing that in the cinematic. It just was going to be a lot cleaner, but this was kind of an exploration of how do we get interiors and exteriors flowing together. I'm a big let's make custom spaces kind of designer. In our Marvel Spider-Man city, as many of you may have seen or heard or played it, and the city's huge, and there's a lot of space there and a lot of things that we can do. Just repurposing buildings and stuff. But I wanted to, tell this story of a cult that was secretive and that was in the shadows and hiding. So there was some tension there. It was like, how can we get back out into the open world more? And so that was an ongoing conversation. And we ultimately landed, a couple of the missions were solely indoors. The other two had some exteriors, and that felt really good. This was actually the early blockout of the final mission. That was completely outdoors. And we basically took a little chunk of Brooklyn, chopped it up, made a custom space for it. But one of the big things too, we had the pitch down. We had, blockouts starting to come together. But this statement of finding the fun kept coming up. It's like, what is making each of these missions unique? And so that first mission, we just had to define it. And these were summaries of those definitions. Mission 1 was all about SpiderBot. And I'll actually go into a little bit of development for that later. But we also wanted to introduce the combat with cultists. So how do we take SpiderBot content, going into a very different space? That was a whole set of metrics to combat with the cultist faction. So I'll try to cover that in a little bit. But mission 2, we wanted to introduce the Wraith Ally team up. And one of the things that we really wrestled with, but we ultimately did it, was team up stealth. This was actually the first game that we've done a stealth ally before. Miles Morales, we had some combat allies, and that was fun. But we had never done stealth before, so we had to figure that out. But it ended up being a big win for the arc and made it feel stand out from the rest. And then, of course, flipping the tables a bit and making Wraith actually turn on Spider-Man and really focus on the boss component of her character. And then finally, doing like a whole bomb disarm, save the city from blowing up before it's too late. And then doing a big spectacle train derailment at the end and tease carnage. So I think once we figured this out, and believe it or not, it took a while to get here. Once we, as we were going, it's like, okay, this is it. We're gonna do this. So now it's like, okay, time to work with all the asset teams. When they became available, when we had their schedule open. It was time to get going. But I like showing this. This was sort of maybe a naive expectation on my end. I was still a pretty young designer, I'll say, too. That's a large part of this talk, actually, is kind of my learnings as a young designer, approaching senior. I'm a senior now, but looking back, I'm like, man, I made a lot of mistakes. So I thought, hey, this should be how it is, right? Pitch process, level blockout, art feature lock, bug fixing. Well, no, it's actually, it's very much, you get to a certain point in development thinking that you're ready for the next step, and then you have to backtrack. I think one of the hardest parts about this whole reality, it was actually that middle section. We were getting to a point where level blockout was getting signed off a little too early. We were figuring out those rise over runs and sharp 90 degrees, but there was still this sort of fun factor missing from some of those blockouts, and art started getting in there and arting the blockouts. And then we'd get feedback from Sony and Marvel saying like, hey, this isn't flowing very well, and we need to actually rethink a lot of these spaces, and we had to scrap a lot of that work, and that was very, very difficult. And then even art direction was changing as well, and we had to come up with a whole identity around the cult, what their graffiti, what their symbolism is, how we're guiding the player with that visual language. I'll go into that in a little bit as well. And I think one of the standout things that we had to figure out, and a story that I didn't get to share when I've done this talk in the past, but I want to share now, the first mission of this arc actually was meant to be on the Golden Path. It was meant to be directly after the Aftermath mission, where you do the sand cleanup in the city, and then you get notification from Chief Clark, the firefighter guy, that there's people in the hospital that need saving. And it was contingent on Spider-Man needs to get there, the building's coming down. At that time, in that form, in that iteration, it felt good. It was working. But the problem was, the reason why we had to change it to from being Golden Path to open world, that was something that came up, was that people didn't want the cultists being introduced before the hunters. The hunters wouldn't be introduced until the transfer mission on the big raft ship, if you guys have played that. So we needed to pivot, but that changed cinematics, that changed some of the environment art, and changed actually some of the characters we were using for this opening mission. And that was a huge rework and a very much an example of this illustration. So we did pivot. It took a lot of work, and I had to lead a lot of those conversations and do some extra legwork to support the asset teams. This is an example of one of my failings of communication. This is actually a shot of the Wraith boss fight when after the blockout got arted, and lighting kind of went in there and did a functional lighting pass. But as you can probably tell in this image, it's a little muddy. It's kind of hard to tell where Wraith is. Maybe I'm sure after a while, just staring, he's like, oh, there she is. But yeah, I think there was this miscommunication happening. Again, it's largely on me, where I didn't give great direction on where areas need to be lit. Like, it was like the whole arena was dark, but all the walls were lit. It kind of needed to be the opposite. We wanted lighting on the arena. We wanted lighting on Wraith. So I had to just take the pill and start actually getting with the lighting teams, the lighting art, even animation, just in the way Wraith is moving around. And so I go into that a little bit here. I ended up actually making, and this was something that ended up being used project-wide, which is super helpful, were lighting guides. And so I would just take top-down views of the levels. And this is actually a more arted version of the second mission. I did this for every mission, but this is just an example where I'd have a legend and the list of objectives, things that we, the golden path or the main direction that we want the player headed, how they'll be traversing it, and all the objects along the way that they'd be interacting with. Once they had this, I mean, it just clicked. Things started coming together really quickly for the lighting team, and the biggest thing was, players and testers that would come in and play this content, they'd understand it. Comprehension was preserved, so that was a big win. Another thing that we did was coming up with a common vocabulary. I worked with the narrative writers on this part of just what are the words that are used in this cult, and how do we shape the art and visual language around these words? And so Fool's Beacon was the big one. That was the reference to Spider-Man, the worthy, the followers of the flame, unworthy, everyone else. Yeah, Crimson Hour, which is kind of the big end of the arc moment. Devils. Something cool too is the reference when the symbiotes are released in Act 3, you start seeing this verbiage used a lot more, and some of the open world crimes that we made for this content, they use that term. They even call Pete a devil when he's wearing the symbiote suit, which is a fun little note. But plagues, they reference actually, and I didn't have it written here, but the sand attack was a plague. New form, we referenced some of our previous games, some of the big citywide disasters that happened, and then the prophecy. But yeah, the little background image here is actually their book of prophecy that you can examine in a couple of the missions. So Once we got that art, everything started coming together once we started getting the art in, and it just felt really good. And yeah, we were just, twice a week, really. We were meeting. We had to start doubling down our efforts on getting the team and the pod aligned. It used to be once a week, and it's like, hey, Tuesdays and Thursdays, we just need to, like, Monday, get some work in, communicate with the asset teams. Tuesday, let's come together, like, let's see how things are going with the content. If there's feedback, let's talk about it. And then take Wednesday to address it. Thursday, reconvene again, same thing. And we did that for several weeks, just across the latter portions of development. And something, too, I took upon myself, just to help with morale, just to help also, with that relationship with my team, as having individual meetings with them and something genuine, not just a greeting, but how are you doing? And getting to know them more beyond just the task at hand. How can I support you? What can I be doing to ease your burden? And then, coming together and seeing how we can work together to improve this. I know it probably seems simple, but the effect that it had on the team was immeasurable. It ended up actually boosting morale and getting us through to the end. So, which brings me to kind of the final section, bringing it all together. So, yeah, once we got feature locked and all the mechanics we were coming up with were settled, it was just a matter of kind of wrapping it all up. So I'll talk through just some of those features and how we brought it together. I actually have some videos for it. So SpiderBot, big thing with SpiderBot. And the first one was, small character in a large space, and we wanted to make that that scale feel impactful. But in this one, it's like, how about we do jump jets? How do we do platforming and get them moving around in a different way, in a different dimension? We also introduced web pulling objects, giving SpiderBot some more impact to its environment. We also, it showed a little earlier, but even the pulse blast. And in a different mission that we have SpiderBot, we use the web shooter as well. So in the first game, SpiderBot was very much this helpless little character that you had to hide and do stealth and try to avoid different things. Now you can actually kind of go on the offense as SpiderBot a little bit, and I'll actually play that video one more time just for fun. But yeah, one of the big things with jump jets is when I first implemented this, you could pretty much just go as high as you want and just keep going. So we had to figure out, okay, fuel cap. How do we come up with even the height clamping? What's the maximum height we can allow the player to go, and then just maybe have them float. Another, and I mentioned earlier, another mission used SpiderBot, so I was actually working with that designer quite a bit, and we came together on some of those rules and metrics for, heights, what can be pulled. There was even visual language things, like what's something that you can pull versus something that you can't. What's something that you can shoot versus something that you can't. And so there was a lot of deliberation on visual language and different moments across each mission that felt appropriate. Another big thing was, that Wraith Ally, and I mentioned earlier some of our metrics, and I'll mention it here. This was our second mission of the arc, and this is probably one of our most complex spaces, and we had to figure out, how does the Wraith Ally work here? What are what's the minimum stealth height we can get away with without it feeling weird, but then not make this place feel too huge? So our minimum stealth height is 6 meters, and the height above that is 4, just for camera clearance, jumping. And so that was a trick, getting this place feeling kind of like a lived-in space. It used to be like a clinic or a hospital, but now it's something different. It's been taken over by the cult. And then fitting Wraith into that. One of the big rules for our allies was, as much as possible, get them on screen. Sometimes it's not possible if the player's just looking wherever, but we try to get Wraith kind of following Spider-Man around. And then coming up with the visual language when it's okay or not okay to do the stealth takedown. And so like right here, when the 2 circles are green, that means it's safe. No enemies are going to see what's about to happen. And when the takedown happens, keeping Wraith on screen and making sure that the camera isn't swaying too much. And if I had more time, right, there's so much that went into this work, and I worked really closely with our gameplay programmers for that, just getting her behavior right, getting her on camera more, getting the visual language, the UI artists, they worked so hard just to get that, the rings and then the icon over the head. Believe it or not, it was pretty wild just to do that. I'm hanging out in this room a little bit more. Another big component to this room was a pretty heavy reliance on outsourcing, and getting each of the moments of the areas of this room, telling that story of the cult, how this is sort of a little bit of their headquarters where they brainwash people, they take in new recruits, they go over the tenets, all that stuff. That ends up actually being a part of a puzzle. It's more of an experiential moment. It's more look around the room and find clues, and then you pick up a guy over your shoulder and then you find a tattoo on their hand, and you have to put it on the scanner to see if it's the right one. And so there's some clues in this room that will give you hints or give you that information you need to find the right tattoo. It was going to be a lot more heady and complex, and we just simplified it. That's another thing, too, that happens a lot with some of these moments is we want to make these really grandiose, very complex puzzle moments, but we don't want to lose momentum. I think that is what we discovered is players are just getting stuck. It wasn't fun anymore. They just did this epic stealth beat with Wraith. Now they're looking for tattoos. And so... so we had to work that out. Another thing, too, was up until this point, I didn't have an earlier shot of this. It was just pretty much all blank walls and some basic signage and, like, imagine the tenants here. A lot of imagine statements. Until that point, there was this element of keeping the team... how am I saying it? Assurance of the vision, casting a vision that maybe won't be fulfilled until the end, and helping the team understand, like, this is all going to come together in the end. It's almost like you just have to trust me. But here are some things we can do until then to get it communicating to players. They can at least understand the intent behind the design and the layout. But until then, until we get all this nice art in here, we kind of have to just have this assurance that it's going to come together. So one of my mentors at the time really reminded me of that. Is a lot of our jobs as designers, at least, is to give that assurance and help people through maybe some of those roadblocks. This gets its own slide because this came in 3 months before we shipped. This indoctrination loop, I was fighting so hard to get it, and it took almost the 3 years of development that I was on this to finally get it. And it's, I wanted it on the TVs. This is supposed to be like, the belly of the beast. This is where they're like indoctrinating and promoting, the next recruits and everybody who's part of the cult. And when I finally got it. Up until then, it was like just a blank image with like some fire. Like a little fire image. But I think once we got it in, it really helped sell what was happening in this room, that, there's a sermon going on. One of the cultists was like giving this whole speech. It really came together. So if you get a chance to play it, I think we really sold it. Similar thing too here with the boss arena, the first boss fight, getting all the art in here, making this feel like, now this is like Cletus's dungeon. This is where he is plotting his takeover of the world, basically. But with the boss fight, I actually mostly worked on the level design. We had a combat designer doing the boss mechanics and behavior and AI, which was awesome because I couldn't do it all myself. We had to split up the responsibilities. So I even implemented the cutscenes and the arena transition. And yeah, the Jason Bolte, our combat designer, he came up with the core moves for Wraith and this special like strike from shadows sequence that we do in phase 2. But I think one of the biggest challenges that we dealt with, and it's kind of notable bringing this up because for whatever reason, it was just such a hard topic. We wanted Cletus around because Wraith stabs him, and that's sort of the impetus of like him becoming Carnage later. But we don't usually keep NPCs hanging around during boss fights. We don't want them getting kicked. We don't want the player to like mess around. And people are like, do we build a whole separate room? Do we have to like knock down a wall and put him in there or something? And I came together with Jason. It's like, what if we just stuck him to the wall? In the cinematic, just have Pete throw him up, web him to the wall, and then start the fight with Wraith. And that's what we ended up doing, and it was nice because then that could transition out from the first phase of the boss fight into phase 2, where Pete grabs him, swings him over, and Cletus pulls a fast one and blows up the whole place. And then we get this epic phase 2, and the building's on fire. And then finally, a couple more was the bomb disarm. This ended up being a one-off, and I'm really sad about that, but this was a fun little kind of punchy mechanic with some feeling of urgency. We didn't end up putting a timer on it, but that beeping, the music, the setting. We had Cletus over on the intercom giving kind of a sermon during this. So it meant to be this really tense moment, but we tried different things. I'll play the video again here. We had the ground version, right? If you're just on the ground, you press L1, R1, and square, you disarm it. If you're in the air, if you're on a perch, we have these different versions. But we tried different things like, we have another mechanic in this game where you use L2 and R2 to get like a sweet spot. We have these adaptive triggers for the PlayStation 5. And it was great in other parts. People decided, hey, if this is happening during combat, if there's, if it's a tense situation, we don't want the player like trying to get their fingers right. We just put it on square, made it feel like he's just punching the detonator and putting it out, which ended up feeling good in the end. So, and then finally, the most expensive thing that we made for this whole thing, which I'm a little like, wow, we actually did it. It's a 3-part cutscene. There was actually a whole cutscene before this where the train is coming, and you think it's over, right? You deal with all the bombs and took out all the guys, but then this train is coming. It's like a last-minute reversal. Like, oh my gosh, this guy's about to like ram a train into all these bombs. And then we have the actual QTE. It was debated how much of this do we do? Do we make this super complex, or is it just like 3 simple like L1 R1 or L2 R2? Use the adaptive triggers. We ended up rolling with that. And another big question is, do we have a hard fail? If you miss one of these, do we fail? Well, as you can see here, no. Even if you were to miss the last one, the bomb would still detonate and derail the train, which is the goal anyway. We kind of, in the last minute effort, these 2 heroes, they think fast. Right? Typically, Spider-Man has to stop the train with his webs, but Wraith thinks of a more destructive version and decides to blow up the train. But then there's this reversal that he gets caught under. And it's an epic cinematic to end that all, where we do a big tease at the end. It's our longest cinematic in the whole game, which shouldn't have been. The Venom content should have gotten more. But that's just how it worked out. But anyway, to recap, and I think I'm okay on time. So hey, if you're coming up with a pitch process and it's going to be a large chunk of content, or if it's multiple missions that make up a quest arc, consider breaking it up and maybe talking with the directors about that. Never forget to collaborate, even feedback, right? If you're getting feedback from your team and maybe an artist has an idea for something or an animator, maybe it can be done this way, something better. Be sensitive to that. Be willing to collaborate, communicate. And when you're making a change, when there's something that you're doing, maybe in a block out, even if maybe nobody's around at first, be sure that it's communicated, even if it's on Slack or if you use Confluence or a wiki page. Kind of get that documented so that people kind of know what to expect and what's coming. Finding the fun, defining each mission. If it's again a quest arc, or if it's just one big mission that has a bunch of parts, what's making each moment stand out and unique. Yeah, and something that I feel like I was stumbling over a little bit, but more concisely, have faith in your vision. The creative vision that you've set out from the beginning. Give your team that assurance. Don't become attached. Don't become attached to initial blockouts. Just a lot of that work is probably going to be thrown away. Just be ready to be fast and loose. I say this because I wrestled with it as a younger designer, and even now a little bit. I'm like, oh, but I thought this was going to be good. Everybody's like, no, it's not, and that's fine. And then of course, right, never forget, metrics are some of the most important things to maintain. There can be exceptions made, I'm sure, depending on the project that you're on. Spider-Man has a very established set of metrics that have worked since Marvel Spider-Man 1, so we've stood by them, but we'll push the boundaries as much as we can. And I think also just a note on that, making sure that the artists and all the asset teams are also honoring those metrics, because sometimes things can get lost in translation if you have a certain block out maybe, and they have ideas like, well, can we make it a little higher? It's like, well, no, now it's going to be out of frame. And finally, being conscious of budgets. I've been kind of glazing over this, but you probably could tell just by the end of this talk, it's like, there's a lot of big set pieces in a quest arc. This is all optional content. The player might, some players maybe just never played this content. They beat Spider-Man 2. So just, how can you be more effective and efficient and cost saving with your content when you're building it? So again, all that to say, I am very happy with how it came out. It was a lot of bumpy roads along the way, and I'm happy to answer any questions too regarding that. I think we have some time for that, but really quickly wanted to highlight just, this is, I don't even know if I've covered every single person here. We even had some outsourcing guys and localization teams. Sony, PlayStation gave us a lot of the resources as well for QA, art, and animation. So yeah, this is all of our internal teams that were involved in this project, and I mean, it's really because of them that it shined so much, and a lot of people end up really loving this content. So thank you guys so much for listening to me talk, and hopefully that was helpful. Yeah, great. I think we have 7 minutes for questions, if my watch is right. So, yes. I think somebody's just coming with the mic. Thanks, Bella.
G'day. Yeah, I was wondering about, you mentioned that some things like cutscenes, like the indoctrination sequence and the train derailing sequence were quite expensive. What is the process for, I guess, getting the buy-in for something so expensive? And also, what were your contingency plans if you, say, didn't have the time to get it in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of the buy-in for that, and I have to admit, I think the character that we're talking about, with Cletus Cassidy and teasing Carnage, that was I think that helped a lot. That character carries a lot of weight with Marvel, and is actually one of their favorite characters to work with. So they were actually really psyched about supporting this with some extra money. So that helped a lot. But if you didn't have, let's say we weren't doing Cletus and I don't know, just some other maybe side Marvel character, I would have been okay, I think, just settling like, hey, if we can get this, great. If not, let's just find an alternative solution. Maybe it is just fire, like a video of fire, or just maybe I do kind of my own. We have ways in script in our level editor to kind of mash together like just different images, switch out this image with this, and I don't know, kind of cobble together my own thing. That would have been my backup plan actually, is just trying to do it all in the engine. But yeah, I think again, the money thing and expensive. I would say it really is probably going to come down to what the publisher and the partners, if you have partners that have a stake in this, what they're interested in seeing. That's what we discovered with this whole arc. It's like, wow, you actually approved of all this stuff. This is because of Cletus, I think. So. Yeah, totally. For sure, it started with just our own internal teams, Insomniac and our animators. Like, hey, there's another thing of like, are you willing to set aside this amount of time? Like, actually, this did take away from other content. There was a certain minute budget for our cinematics. And there was a breakdown actually later on that I discovered where the cinematic minutes that we were given, a lot of it ended up going to this, and a lot of the other missions actually were kind of shaved off as a result, which is interesting. So there was a trade-off, I guess. We did end up having to take away from other parts of the game. So is that a little helpful? Great, thank you. Yes, in the front.
Hi. You
Yes.
touched on the first mission and its placement. I was wondering how much input you had on the other missions and their place in the wider narrative, and if so, was that challenging? Was there any guiding principles around where they would land?
Yeah, I think pretty early on there was a talk of like what mission is going to go where, and the order of things, how the narrative is going to unfold. Is it appropriate to start introducing the cultists in this sand-destroyed hospital? Yeah, I think we at one point tried flipping it around like the first and second mission, but ultimately, I was pretty happy with just starting. Let's do the Spiderbot intro and start you off trying to rescue people right in a hospital. Kind of have this reversal moment. It's like you think you're saving, like you are saving people, and you thought you've saved them all, but then you find out about there's one more left. That ended up being actually a very compelling narrative hook, just getting us started with introducing this faction. So yeah, I guess to answer the question more completely, there was a say. I guess I had a say of like what part of the story goes where, and but it was kind of nice. A lot of us were pretty reasonable and agreeable with each other. It's like, I think this works here. Yeah, you like that? Anyway, I didn't have to fight anybody, thankfully. It wasn't like I had to stand my ground on anything. Yeah, cool. I think we have, we're at time, I guess, yeah. I'll be around though. I'm happy to serve you guys. I'm here the whole week, so yeah, find me and love to chat more. Thank you guys.